seen such a storm of disinformation and lies. No other war in the world gets countered in the way that Gaza has been. By obsessing over the numbers, because Hamas does,
Yeah.
we're actually playing their game. The really big mistake Israel's made over the last couple of years is trying to fight emotion with fact.
I'm excited to have in the studio in Jerusalem today Andrew Fox, Senior Fellow at the Henry Jackson Society and a voice of reason during the last few years of war. Andrew, welcome.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, I love that you're in Israel so often, and thank you for being that real sort of voice of clarity in the wilderness that has been the fog of the last 2.5 years of not just the military war, but of course the narrative war.
Yeah, it's about trying to keep fairness in the conversation.
Well, absolutely.
That's all it is. It's just getting a fair rep and treating Israel just like any other country.
Well, that's part of the reason that I guess we're here, the double standards, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. We've seen such a storm of disinformation and lies, and a real different standard applied to Israel.
Were you surprised by that? I mean, were you involved with any type of Israel stuff before October 7th?
Well, I was a Middle East academic,
Yeah.
so I'd done my master's studies on strategic questions in the Middle East. So I was very familiar with the history of the region. And, even looking back to the 1970s, if you look at, for example, the media in West Germany, the sort of the more left-leaning pro-Soviet media, we're using exactly the same playbook
Yeah.
that we've seen for the last 2.5 years.
Yes.
But this time it's supercharged with social media and bot storms and all the new technology that deep fakes and AI, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's happened before, but never on a scale like we're seeing. It's still going on.
Yeah, it is still going on. But you came out pretty early to say, well, let's calm down, everyone. In the middle of a war, you don't know numbers. Everybody got so obsessed with these numbers, which every day there's a new lie that's coming, into the surface. Oh no, well maybe it was this many killed or those many killed, or maybe there was less innocence. And you've been speaking quite a lot about that. What is your assessment of the whole thing?
I think we can break it down into two parts. There's the part which is the immediate numbers,
Yeah.
where something happens and they go 500 dead.
Yeah.
And you're like, that cannot be true.
You can't check it in 5 minutes,
No,
can you?
exactly. I've called for airstrikes myself in Afghanistan.
Mm.
And I know what they're like. I know the chaos. I know the damage they do to buildings and the rubble. And you just cannot come up with a number that quickly. So
Yeah.
we know that's a nonsense. And then when it comes to the other half of this, which is the very famous list that's updated daily and the UN have been brandishing and the
Yeah.
world's media have been running with, that's a deliberate tactic. That's absolutely a deliberate tactic by Hamas.
who?
By
Hamas.
Hamas.
Right.
Because no other war in the world gets counted in the way that Gaza has been.
Right.
You go on Wikipedia, and if you look at the number of fatalities in Afghanistan, there's 100,000 margin of error.
So how
In
many?
a 20-year war.
How many was the casualties in Afghanistan? Just for
The Wikipedia number is something between 100 and 200,000.
so between 100 and 200,000, which means that even today, years after the war's over, there's still no real clarity on what the final numbers were. And yet Israel is held to this crazy standard that you should know the next day.
Yeah, and actually, it doesn't matter. And that sounds really cold and callous because, of course, every death matters to the
Of
loved
course.
ones of that person who
Of
died.
course.
So I don't mean it doesn't matter at a human level,
Of course.
but at a legal level, at a strategic level. What matters is how these people died. Was it legal? Was it proportionate?
Yeah.
And that's the question we should be asking. And by obsessing over the numbers, because Hamas does,
Yeah.
we're actually playing their game.
That's right.
We're framing the argument in the terms they want us to frame it in. So I've done I've done a lot of work on the numbers, and I published that paper through the Henry Jackson Society.
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I kind of regret it because I got
Mm.
sucked into playing their game too.
But we all did, though, didn't we, Andrew? What else were we going to do? We're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't. If we don't come up with a credible argument against the lies and the libels, then we're not reacting. If we do react, we're playing their game. We were playing their game from the minute 7th of October happened, because what else were we to do? They kind of, they checkmated us in a way.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to another issue, and that is that Hamas are a very effective enemy.
Yeah.
I think it never pays to underestimate your enemies, and I think Hamas are very, very clever.
Mm.
They're very strategic. They
Yeah.
know exactly what they're doing.
Mm.
They have, I'm sure they have psychologists on staff because some of the stuff they've done and the pinpoint cruelty they've been able to enact.
With the hostages, you mean?
Yeah, that's a great example.
Yeah.
They know exactly what they're doing and they're very good at it.
Yeah, they are very good at it. And they're very good with the propaganda war. And of course, when you've got the Qataris pumping in money into, Al Jazeera, who I've called Goebbels TV, then the combination is the delegitimization and demonization campaign that we've seen over the last 2.5 years where people are obsessed with numbers when they wouldn't have known any number for any war before. Everybody's an expert now, Andrew. Everyone.
Yeah, and then, of course, you've got the fake industry that's multiplying this number by 10
Oh, yeah,
based on some random statistical model that they've just invented.
exactly.
And, it's that whip that's used to hammer Israel with.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think you're releasing a book in the next few months called Redemption, the Seventh Front War of Israel. Tell us a little bit about this book that you've written.
Well, my inspiration really is, first of all, it starts with the nemesis of 7th of October. And then there's this story of redemption throughout the war as Israel has now, certainly militarily and
Mm.
strategically, got itself into a position that is far better than 6th of October,
Yep.
no longer ringed around by
Yep.
Iran. And I think it's really important that you cannot just look at one front in this war in isolation. Like, they're
Right.
all connected. It was hardly reported in the West that, thousands of people were displaced from northern Israel by Hezbollah rockets. That was almost completely neglected until the Beeper operation obviously put it on the front pages of,
Yeah.
of the world. The Syrian front, the Yemeni front, the Iranian front, these are all interconnected.
Yeah.
And what happened in one affected what happened in the others. So it's really important, I think, to tell that story in the round. So that's what I'm going to try and do when I finish my book.
Well, that's amazing because I think you're correct. I don't think people see it. But you as a military expert, did you feel that the whole thing was planned by all the proxies at the same time? Or do you think that once one jumped in, they said, oh, we might as well?
Well, my sense is that Sinwar went early. It was always the plan.
You went early, right?
Yeah, and if you speak to Northern Command in the IDF, they were always worried about a 7th of October, but
But coming from the
but from
north.
the Radwan forces of Hezbollah rather than the
Yes.
Nukba forces of Hamas.
Yeah.
Um, and they were ready for it, and they were prepared. And I think one of the best decisions made in the whole war was to put divisions in the north, and I think that deterred
The
Hezbollah.
day after on the
I
8th.
think it was on the 7th, actually.
7th, yeah.
Yeah. One of the first decisions Gallant made was to move those divisions north, and I think
Right.
that potentially stopped that from escalating as badly as it might have done.
Yeah. I mean, do you imagine, whenever I feel d- down, traumatized about the 7th of October, which we all experienced here, as somebody said to me once, well, do you imagine if Hezbollah would have attacked on the 7th of October and Iran and the Houthis? I mean, what would have happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's unthinkable
It's
doomsday
really
scenario.
unthinkable. So the fact he went early for whatever reason, because of communications or he didn't, whatever it is, I don't know, he thought he was going to get luckier.
Mm.
I guess that's what decided the war in its whole painful 2 years.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And, we always have to analyze both sides here.
Yeah,
So we have to analyze Israeli decision making, but you have to analyze Hamas's as well,
absolutely.
because that's how you learn lessons.
Yeah.
And I think when we pin those decisions down that happened probably, in early October, before the 7th, the decision making process of Hamas, I think if you look at the paperwork that was found on some of the fighters who crossed
Yeah.
the border, they absolutely had the plan to get to Jerusalem if they could.
Really?
Yeah, yeah, they were going to go as far into Israel as possible, and at the same time,
Were they not overplaying their hand though?
this is the other half of it. They
Right.
had, the reason they live streamed all the stuff they were doing was for two reasons. Firstly, it projects strength,
Yeah.
and secondly, I think the intention was to inspire the West Bank to rise up,
Yes.
inspire,
Jerusalem.
Hezbollah to rise up, and maybe even Syria.
Yeah.
Try and get everyone going.
Mm.
Look what we've done. Come on, let's make the Zionist entity a thing of the past. And
And
so,
what happened to the rest of their so-called mates, allies? Do you think they were actually, ooh, no? Or what do you think? Why do you think they weren't inspired by that?
yeah, I think the deterrence factor of shifting the IDF to the north was huge.
Mm.
Can't understate that.
That's very interesting insight. I've not thought about it in that way.
And then, of course, you had a significant American presence as well.
True. Biden did his bit at the beginning of the war. He said, "Don't," and he moved
Okay.
military. He hit the carrier to the region.
I think that was a huge deterrent factor because you're no longer tangling just with Israel. You're now tangling with the United States Navy, and as Iran may be about to find out, and may have found out already by the time this goes out. The United States Navy is a very different beast to pretty much any other fighting force in the world.
So now that you've segued so beautifully onto Iran, I don't know. You come to Israel a lot. I want to ask you a personal question. Do you feel this time that we're like after the war, or do you feel that we're before another war? Because I feel like we're in this limbo of, yes, we've more or less done with Gaza, but let's see what's going to happen with Iran. Or do you feel that there is an after the war feeling here and right now?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I do think it's both. And I've got friends who work in some fairly specialised IDF units, and they've been called up last night
Wow.
to go and get back into uniform. So, there's definitely a sense that the state of Israel is taking this seriously
Mm.
and understands what could be about to happen. Uh, but by the same token, when you arrive at Ben Gurion, there's now no hostage posters,
Right.
and that leaps out at you.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, yeah,
I
the
never,
first time I've
the
seen
first
it.
time
Yeah.
I've never, where all the traveling that I've done representing Israel since October 7th, I never imagined for one second that we'd get to a point where there would be no
Mm.
posters. Did you? Did you think Hamas was going to give up
No, I
that leverage?
I mean, I always thought the route to the hostage release was through Doha and to a
Right.
lesser extent through Ankara, but
Right.
I didn't think the lever was there. I never anticipated Trump would just bribe them, which is, actually quite inspired when you think about it.
What do you mean?
So Qatar, in exchange
Yes.
for
How
that,
we bribe Qatar.
yeah, they got all those security assurances. They've actually, for a tiny country, over the last 2 years, they've turned themselves into a pivotal player in the Middle East.
They're 330,000 people.
Mm.
They've got no army. It's really incredible what money can do
Yeah, absolutely. And now they're in
and
a
strategy.
strategic position. Yeah, they've done brilliantly.
But
To the
they've got
point
a
where
military
Saudi and
base.
UAE are falling apart.
Yeah, I know. But okay, so let's get back to Iran
Mm.
because it's really important because we do feel that this is like something's happening. You're a military expert. Give me the scenarios here, Andrew, because everybody's on tenterhooks. We don't know what's going to happen. Are we looking at a paper tiger and a short war, like the 12-day war? Are we looking to something more prolonged? Are we looking to Israel doing the dirty work, America coming in at the end? What is your assessment? And we're not going to hold you to it.
I mean, there's so many options on the table, but
Mm.
I think we have to consider, first of all, that military strength is only one lever of statecraft, and diplomacy and economics are the other two. And arguably in 2026, information is the fourth.
Yeah.
So we have seen all of those levers getting pulled over the last few weeks. The sanctions are clearly working. Washington is trying something that looks like diplomacy. I mean, I'm skeptical about that ever succeeding, making a deal with the Iranians.
Do you think they're doing it just to say we tried?
Yeah, I think so.
Right.
I think so. I don't think anyone
Which
really
they did already, didn't they?
expectation.
Yeah, yeah.
But what it does is give time for the third lever to move into place, which is getting the necessary equipment and material into the Gulf ready to strike. And we've now seen 2 carrier groups,
Right.
huge inload of fighters from across bases in Europe. It's actually still not quite the level it was for Iraq, which
Really?
gives you an idea of how massive that campaign was.
Wow.
So whether they've got enough stuff in theatre to actually topple the regime, that's to be decided, quite frankly. But when you look at the military options on the table, I see 2 potentially.
Okay.
The first is some kind of limited strike to try and force them back to the table and give
But
up
they're at
uranium.
But they are at the
Yeah,
table.
but they're not
But
agreeing.
they're not serious.
Yeah, they're not.
They're not agreeing to anything.
Yeah, so essentially a warning strike first, and say if you don't come to the table and give us what we want, then there will be a lot more. So that would make a logical escalation pathway. Or they could just go for it, where you see wave after wave of airstrikes on a daily, if not weekly, schedule, where they systematically dismantle the regime and the IRGC and all the security institutions. Now, we know Trump doesn't like long, protracted wars,
That's right.
so it could end up being somewhere in the halfway house, where
Which is what?
where they have a big airstrike, but it doesn't have a decisive effect.
But isn't that what we had in July?
Pretty much.
What does it take to topple the regime? Because, I mean, it felt to us in Israel, we always felt, oh, the big war is going to be with Lebanon, with Hezbollah. And we managed to cut their legs off before they were even out. We did the same with Iran in a way. We managed to destroy half their launchers, half their senior military staff, all their nuclear scientists before the war even started. So the question is, don't we have a few more of those tricks to pull? And because the people have now risen, isn't this the moment that we could do something smaller? Maybe that's just me in my optimistic head. Do something smaller that then the people will just take over? Or is it much?
Yeah, potentially. But look, the Iranian regime has 1 million men under arms.
1 million men
Yeah.
out of 100 million, almost 100 million people.
Yeah, so they're
That's a lot.
and a lot of them are loyalists, and they are fundamentalist loyalists who have a religious faith in this rather than being kind of paid to do it. So they're heavily motivated not to change sides or give up or just refuse to fight. So that makes it challenging. You've got 11 regional commands for the IRGC around the country. Each one of those has a bunch of subordinate commands as well. So, if you want to take that security apparatus to pieces, you have to hit all of those. And that's
did you
a
say?
huge target deck. So 11 commands.
11 commands.
And then levels beneath them
Of
as well.
course. And Was there any credence to the reports that some of them were switching sides? And also, the Iranians have got their own, the army, which is not the IRGC, or that they were switching sides, or that the police were switching sides. Was this just wishful thinking?
I mean, I never saw anything really confirmed on that. And of course, they have got that media blackout, which
Right.
makes getting information off the ground really challenging. And we are, of course, in an information war as well.
Of course.
So there's going to be PR and the propaganda on both sides.
Mhm.
I consider our efforts, the Western efforts, Israeli, American, European efforts to be, you know, not to malign, but they're certainly trying to put pressure on the regime,
Of course.
and also to kind of help the diaspora, the Iranian diaspora, and give them hope as well. Um, but look, we're looking for three things when it comes to regime change. You're looking for some kind of military shock, which is people changing sides or refusing to fight. You're looking for a popular uprising, which we have seen, and it
I've seen it.
has been brutally put down. So whether they've got enough in the tank to go again, that's an interesting factor. We'll have to keep an eye on. And then finally, a psychological shock, and that looks something like a really senior commander or leader changing sides, defecting, being killed,
Being killed.
fleeing. Some major seismic move. If you think about Assad fleeing Syria, that's the equivalent I'm thinking of here. So we're looking for really those three things, and we've not seen enough evidence to conclusively say whether we've got any of the three in motion quite yet.
Unless that is, I guess, the essence of the attack if it comes. I mean, I don't know how you do that, but you kill Khomeini,
Yeah, exactly.
and that's the shock.
Yeah, but I think there's one other factor to consider, and that is that the Iranians will have learned from the 12-day war.
Mm.
They will have seen where their weaknesses were, where their vulnerabilities were. They'll see
Right.
how easily Israel took out their air defenses. So they will have spent the last, what are we on now, 7 or 8 months changing tactics.
Is that enough time though to change and recharge and bring back all the things that they lost?
Well, we talked about Hamas and how adaptive and clever they are. You cannot underestimate your enemy.
Never.
It's really important not
Never.
to do that. And when I had a briefing last month over in Tel Aviv, where they're pretty certain their rocket stocks are now back where they were before the 12-day war.
Wow. They're saying they bought Chinese rockets, but still,
But still,
rockets nevertheless, aren't they?
it still goes bang. It still hurts people. So
Yeah.
whether they can get them off the ground or not is another question, because we don't know about the launcher situation, because obviously Israel was incredibly successful at destroying those launchers. So there's so many variables here. It's never easy, and anyone who tells you it is a fool or a liar.
And you decided to come this weekend?
I'm just hoping I can get home.
Yes. There was a bit of a storm yesterday with an ex security forces senior guy said on Israeli TV, I wouldn't go away this weekend. And people went nuts. And the finance minister said, no, forget what he said. So this is where we're at, aren't we? We're all on tenterhooks. But we've been on tenterhooks for 3 weeks. I thought it was going to happen 3 weeks ago, but I guess in retrospect, nobody was ready, were they?
Well, of course, Trump had the aircraft carrier over in the Caribbean
Right,
for his Venezuela shenanigans.
right.
So I think there's a really good lesson for the White House and the Pentagon there about the requirements to keep these carriers, where you need them. America has, I think, 11 aircraft carrier groups, but only half of them will be used at any one time, because the rest will be refitting and that sort of thing.
And how many do we have here now?
Got two of them here now,
And is that enough, do you think?
potentially. It depends what they want to achieve. Do they want to have that multi-day, multi-week, wave after wave campaign? Is that enough? Probably not. If they want to do something a bit more limited, then almost certainly yes.
And Andrew, would this be completely impossible without boots on the ground, do you think?
And that's the really killer question, because look, we've got
That's what everybody's...
so many examples of regime change in the Middle East where it's gone badly wrong, with boots and without boots. Iraq was a disaster.
Got worse.
Libya was a disaster.
Yeah.
Syria took ages for Assad to actually be toppled, and even then he was only toppled by kind of internal
It was
insurgency.
trouble because Hezbollah was out of action.
Yes.
That was only because of the war with us.
Yeah, and then Turkey backing HTS
Yeah.
to get in there and knock him off. So many examples of it going wrong. So it's all about planning. It's all about getting your strategy right. And if we look at all of these things, what the mistake we made in all of them was not having a clearly articulated strategic end state. Like, we are using military force for this reason to achieve this political objective.
Right.
And if you can clearly take one lesson from the last 20 years, it's the need for that. And it's a mistake Israel to an extent made in Gaza. For 2 years we were asking, what's your end state? And is it realistic? Is it achievable? And in the end, Mr. Trump made the decisive intervention.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's, that goes right back to Clausewitz. It goes right back to Prussian thinking from the early 1800s. And it's a lesson that's timeless.
Well, yeah, we're not great on strategy. We're like master tacticians, but we're not good at strategy. Maybe it's because we're just not used to long term thinking because we're just like, we're living day by day here.
And also it's obscenely complicated.
Yeah,
It's,
that too.
this is a 10D chess match in the Middle East
Yeah.
because every action has unexpected
Yeah.
reactions, and you never know which way it's going to go. Who saw Assad falling? Nobody.
Nobody.
Nobody saw that happening. And that's how quickly things can change
Yeah.
overnight, which makes formulating strategy incredibly difficult. So I'm being a little bit of an armchair general here.
No, but
Uh,
but
I
it's
think
right. You can't put your flag in the sand and say this is what's going to happen in such a complicated environment where anything could happen.
Mm.
I'm just hoping for the best. I mean, what could be the best outcome if we're like dreaming here?
the absolute dream is that those three levers of military, diplomatic, and economic cause the regime just to give up and flee.
Right. When they see that there's no way out.
There's no way out. They're completely cornered. The people are going to rise up. They've obviously got covert support from both America and Israel on the ground. They read the writing on the wall and they go, "Hey Putin, can we get a dacha?"
It's gonna get a bit. It's gonna get a bit crowded in Moscow, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but
They've already got Assad there.
they'll get free eye checkups from Assad, so there's every cloud.
It's really quite incredible. So, what are you focused on these days, Andrew? What is your main focus?
Topic wise or activity wise?
Yeah, both.
Well, so I'm on a bit of a different tack at the moment because things militarily have quietened down for a few months. So I've got a psychology background as well as a
Wow.
war studies background. So I've got a paper coming out on the psychology of disinformation and why the brain gets lied to and how malign actors manipulate us to make us believe disinformation. So
Well, maybe you can help us set up here a decent strategy for the narrative war, which we've lost so badly.
yeah, and actually I've been in Israel at a conference talking about just that this week. So people are alive to the problem, but look, it's a 2,500, if not 3,000-year-old problem because it has its
Come on.
roots in anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
It's a numbers game.
Yes and no.
Go on.
We have zero strategy. We don't have people.
For information, certainly, yeah, I'll give you that.
We have zero strategy. And also, my big criticism is that our, whatever you want to call it, our narrative warfare is highly politicized. And I truly believe that we should have, like we have an innovation authority, we should have a narrative warfare authority with professionals, with departments. Take it seriously.
I completely agree. And the really big mistake Israel's made over the last couple of years is trying to fight emotion with fact.
Exactly.
Because if you're in a fight with your partner, husband, wife, whatever it is,
It's not about the facts.
and it's getting heated, and you say, "Calm down, you're being irrational."
Oh, yeah.
How does that go? Just fuel on the fire.
You can ask my husband.
I can only imagine. But that's what Israel's effectively been doing because
Yeah.
people are upset about an image of a dead child or whatever it might be.
Yeah,
And the Israeli response has been, "Oh, that was a legal and proportionate airstrike, but we
Exactly.
followed a targeting process." And
exactly.
people go, "I don't care. I'm really angry about this dead child," as is understandable to be.
Absolutely.
And how you fight that emotion is really, really tricky. Really,
So,
really tricky.
and so you're writing a paper about psychological warfare, which I think is, I really believe that we are in this hybrid war.
Mm.
So it's militarily, and it's of course propaganda, a narrative, and psychology is part of that propaganda, the narrative, isn't it?
More so than ever because we're in a social media age.
Exactly.
And I call it convergent warfare.
Convergent.
Yeah.
I got my term from Eric Weinstein, a scientist. He calls it hybrid, but convergent is good.
That's a
Yeah.
common term, and actually convergent's my term. I've invented it.
Nice.
Because I think we're beyond hybrid now, where technology and information and tactics
Have
are all
converged.
blending into one.
Yeah.
And a great example is think about the pause between the Khan Yunis operation and the Rafah operation in Gaza. There was a 4-month pause between January and April when they actually went in, and that came about through information. All eyes on Rafah. Remember that?
Exactly.
So they
And that's what affected
tactical-
Biden to stopping Israel to going in.
You got it.
This is what I keep telling the Israeli authorities. I keep telling them, you guys think it's separate, but it actually has national security implications. And I use that example.
Yeah. Well, you've got convergent warfare as a term now, and that's debuted on JNS. So
Very good.
okay.
You heard it here first, Convergent Warfare by Andrew Fox. And so if you were advising us right now, what would be the first thing you would do? Let's say you're now the advisor for the government of Israel. I wish it would be my dream. for somebody to come from the outside and say, guys, you need a solution.
I think I'd start small, and I'd
Okay.
start with an understanding that this is not a quick win,
Right.
which is tough because in the era of social media, you're expecting these
Quick.
instant dopamine hits. People are addicted to fast solutions.
Hmm.
This is a 20-year recovery program,
L-
effectively.
I agree. And think when Qatar started
Mm.
20, 30 years ago.
Yeah, and it's about building from a low level. Try and
Like,
find that emotional affinity with
mm,
Israel and the rest of the world. Show why Israel is important. Show that Israelis
are
are
regular people.
exactly that. And I hesitate on saying it, but that's the perception that
Yeah.
Israelis have horns and all they do is go around
Yes.
killing Palestinians, which is
Yes.
obviously nonsense.
Absolutely.
But you have to start building that affinity at the very lowest level. So it's a small incremental campaign to kind of just build that bond, and then use the great things about Israel. The incredible medical developments, the technological developments.
Mm.
The way Israel is a force for good in the Middle East and in the wider world,
Yeah.
but show people that at a human level. So
Yes.
rather than say, "Look, we've made a cancer cure,"
Yeah.
and say, "Look, here's somebody
Yeah.
in, I don't know, Chicago
Who
who
got cured
got
thanks to
cured
this
thanks to
thing that
us, and now he's got an extra 20 years of
smart.
life, and here he is with his grandkids."
Mm.
It's humanizing that story
Yeah.
is the key to this, I think.
No, I totally agree. I actually reminds me of the letter that Charlie Kirk wrote Netanyahu, saying exactly what you're saying, and saying you could do a campaign called "Dude, You Got Us Wrong."
Yeah, yeah,
That was his example, and that's a very similar thing that you're saying. I totally agree with you, but there actually has to be some thought or a solution. I don't even think we're there yet.
no, I mean, where's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs been for 2 years?
No.
There's been no network in place, and actually, all the world has really seen has been the IDF spokesman.
Yes.
And look, I like Daniel Hagari; he's a
Yeah.
good guy
But a man in a uniform is still a man in a
with
uniform
a thick Hebrew accent.
with a thick Hebrew accent.
It's not gonna win.
It's not going to win
It's not
hearts
gonna
and
win
minds.
minds
No.
because people don't want to listen, and it's certainly not gonna win
Yeah.
hearts.
And I don't think it's about one spokesperson. I've done tons and tons of interviews. It's really about messaging, a strategy, about being just part of something which everybody's fighting on the same page and not, imagine you're a military man. Imagine fighting a war with no military command.
Mm.
And that's what we're all doing in a way.
Yeah, I completely agree.
There's just no command structure. And so thinking now ahead for Israel, let's say the Iran war is over, how do you see the new Middle East? You mentioned earlier the whole Saudi Qatari split, which I'm very well aware of. I'm very involved with Abraham Accord's work. What do you think Saudi? What do you think is motivating them right now to pick a previous ally as an enemy, or to sort of go 180 away from Israel, when that's what we were doing before October 7th, and arguably, and I think we've proven that, and the evidence came out that that's why October 7th happened when it happened, because the
Yeah.
last thing they wanted, the Islamists, is for Israel to make peace with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, I think there's two reasons. Firstly, Saudi's broke.
Broke,
Yeah.
really.
So their big plan has now run out of money.
But don't they have a lot of oil?
They do, but it needs to be at a certain barrel price for their long-term plans to be affordable, and it's well below that barrel price right now. So they're on a financial squeeze.
Wow.
And then the second factor, I think, is more strategic, and that is that there is now competition in the Gulf and in the Middle East where there wasn't before the war, because we've seen Turkey and Qatar get huge boosts.
Right.
And that has now set up a strategic competition, because Saudi was kind of the unassailable kind of superpower in the Middle
They
East.
were.
Now they have rivals. And so now they're not only,
So they join in with them instead of sticking with their old friends like the
well,
UAE?
they're doing what they always do and playing both sides. That is almost the textbook definition of how the Arab states conduct that international
That's what the
diplomacy.
Qataris have done. They've hedged their bets on both sides.
Exactly. So they'll be taking huge amounts of money from China. They'll be doing backroom deals with Iran at the same time as talking nice to Washington.
Mm.
And they have the other ability, because they're not a democracy, to think in really long-term chunks.
Mm.
So they'll be positioning themselves not for 2026, but for 2046, if not beyond.
Yeah. And I guess for them, I mean, maybe this is just my thinking, but the fact of a future free Iran probably, in terms of the oil prices, doesn't help,
Yeah, exactly.
because they're so rich in crude oil that all you need is some refining capabilities from the West, and that's it.
Yeah.
The oil goes down.
Yeah, although of course if they mine Hormuz, then the oil barrel price will go high, and that really suits Saudi. So it's always wheels within wheels. And like I say, if you drag it back to that military, economic, and diplomatic,
military,
They're absolutely thinking
diplomatic.
in those three spheres.
So, it's really wonderful that you come to Israel so often. What do you when you go home? Um, what do you tell your friends, your colleagues, people that you speak to about the mindset here?
It's a really tricky one. It's a really tricky one because I think the charm of Israel is huge, and that's something I do talk about a lot.
You have to be here to actually
You
see
have
it.
to understand it. You know,
That's the thing.
you have to see what the beach run on Tel Aviv is like
Yeah,
to actually get your head around it. And
yeah,
you know, you have to see those skyscrapers and that you know, it looks like any other Western city.
yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't realize that. I think
No.
they expect it to be kind of
A
like
desert?
Baghdad or whatever,
Yeah,
desert.
Baghdad, yeah.
Um, and then of course there's that real obvious love and care of the actual country itself that really comes through, I think, to an outsider.
Yeah,
Like this should be desert.
yeah.
And it's not, and that's because of the Israelis putting that love and care into, you know, looking after their land. That really comes through. And then I think you have to also acknowledge that there are imperfections and flaws, just as there are in every country.
Any country, yeah.
Um, but also do it in a humorous way, I think.
Well, we have to. I mean, that's what's kept the Jewish people alive, isn't it? Our dark sense of humor. And Andrew, we're both Brits.
Hmm.
Are you worried about your country?
Yes and no. And I get this asked by Israelis all the time.
Yeah.
A slightly exaggerated perception of how bad it is.
Mm,
You know, it's there are undeniably areas that are bad.
right.
You know, you go to I'm an Aston Villa fan, so I was right in the
Oh
mix
God.
during the
You were
Tel
there.
Aviv kind of
Right.
mess. I've got death threats over that, and that's not normal. You know,
Wow.
that's not normal. So you know, there are areas where it's problematic, and also there's that sort of slight political subversion happening as well. You know, with Gaza MPs,
That's right.
that's voting
Nuts.
on sectarian lines.
I
Like, we
know.
don't do that in the UK. Well, maybe in Northern Ireland, but we don't vote.
That's right. You have your MP for your region,
Yeah,
and that's what they're supposed to take care of.
yeah. So that's concerning. But you know, you go to most places, and life is carrying on as normal. You know, no GDP growth, everyone complaining about the weather, excellent queuing, obsession with cups of tea.
Excellent queuing. That's definitely for sure something Israelis have not learnt to do.
I
To
mean,
queue.
Ben Gurion check-in is one of my favorite places just to watch people and the
Trying to
carnage
get
that
through.
ensues.
Queuing is not something that Israel has managed to capture. Um, and finally, I want to ask you. You know, you hear calls from different political parties and groups in the UK for, I guess, boycotting Israel's defense ties with the UK. And actually, something curious that I read today, this Zach Polanski, a guy, I have zero respect for him, but he says we should stop intelligence sharing. And I wrote back and I said, that's for your sake,
Yeah.
not ours. Could you talk a little about that? Intelligence
Yeah,
sharing?
particularly on the military side of things. You know, my last paper for the Henry Jackson Society was Lessons from Gaza.
Right,
I interviewed nearly 100 IDF soldiers and find out how they actually fought and what
right.
we can learn from that when we next go to war. And there's so much to take away from how Israel has done this. There's two countries in the world that are experts at war fighting right now. It's Ukraine and it's Israel.
Yeah.
And it's insanity not to learn from what Israel's achieved over the last 2 and a bit years. I'll give you one example which really stuck with me. There are 600 Israeli soldiers alive today who would have been dead from their wounds in 2016
Wow.
because of the medical innovations and the way that Israel has done a data-driven change to how they do medical procedures. Like 600 families,
That's
yeah,
incredible.
600 families have their sons alive because of the way Israel has innovated during this war. Why on earth would we not learn from that? I mean, I've been to 13 funerals of colleagues and friends from Afghanistan.
Wow.
And the idea that, you know, some of
That they
them
could have been
could have been
saved.
alive if we
Oh
learned
my
from the
God.
IDF, you know, it's heartrending. So, you know, stuff like that, it's like you say, this will make us better. It'll mean fewer flights into Brize Norton with coffins with Union flags on if we go to war. That's what we're talking about.
I mean, not even talking about the intelligence sharing
Mm.
on radical Islamists who may come into Britain
Oh,
that we may know about.
you know, especially given that we've taken a number of Gazans, which,
Wow.
you know, given how badly we messed up taking Afghan refugees and where we
Right.
had to take 13,000 extra because we blew their security by accident.
Oh my
I don't know
God,
if
I
you were
remember
tracking that.
that.
Yeah. And I don't believe for a second that the system that was so flawed as to do that did proper security checks on every Gazan that's arrived in the UK. You know, intelligence sharing with Israel is vital at this point.
Well, I tend to agree with you, but I don't want to be biased about it. Andrew, thank you for your incredible work, for being that voice, and you're always welcome here.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.